And some of you may remember Babs from when she was in our network, but I am thrilled to introduce to those of you who may not be um, my friend and your friend, Babs Hall from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And we're just thrilled that our DBHDD partners um, were able to participate today. So, Babs, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, fantastic. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Division of Aging Services Case Management Bootcamp. My name is Babs Hall, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to spend some time with you this afternoon to provide a little deeper overview of the core principles of case management. And I do just want to extend a special thank you to my friend and colleague, Tom Snyder, for the invitation to be a part of your training agenda today. So thanks so much, Tom. Just a little bit about me, just to give me a little street cred that I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. My professional career began with the Georgia Department of Family and Children's Services, where I served as a social services case manager for both child protective services and adult protective services for a total of 6 years. So yes, that does make me a survivor. I was able to get out, and I followed my time at DFACS by serving as the ADRC resource specialist for SAWIGA Council on Aging down in Albany. And then from there, I did serve as the ADRC program manager for 3 years. After a wonderful time in aging, I did have the opportunity to spend 3.5 years in behavioral health before I transitioned to my role that I'm currently in with the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And I currently work in the Division of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So, with about nearly 20 years of experience in social services, I have to say that case management is definitely one of the key roles, I think, in the ongoing work that we all do collectively. So, just a little overview of our agenda this afternoon. And again, we're going to touch on all the things that Tom has already mentioned. We're just going to take a little deeper dive, but we're going to look at person-centered care versus system-centered care and what those look like and what the differences are. We're also going to talk a little bit about the role of case managers, as well as conflict-free case management, which we just discussed. And next, we'll talk about cultural competence. And then lastly, one of the things that I think is just key to tying all these together is the importance of self-care for case managers and healthcare professionals. So with that, here you see the guiding principles of person-centered planning. And when we talk about person-centered planning, it's exactly what the name says. As you can see here, the person should really be the center of all the activity that's happening. They should be the center of the communication, the center of the environment, the center of the health care needs. The person is truly the center of the work we're doing. So with the person being the center, they're going to be the focus of all of our planning. So for you, this may be your client, your individual, your patient, your consumer. I don't know what's your trend right now, Tom? What word are you guys using? Do we have a name for the individuals we serve?
No, we
Okay.
use client consumer kind of interdependently, yeah, interchangeably.
Okay, fantastic. So just so I'm using the right lingo, and one thing from the behavioral health world where I came and now in the IDD world, we try our best to use the word individual, right? Because we're all individuals first and foremost. So for our presentation today, you're going to hear me use that word a lot. But for you guys, it could be interchangeable with client or consumer. Also, we want to consider the purpose of person-centered planning. It is led through shared action. So this means it's not just the case manager who's driving all the action to help this individual support their needs and wants, but it's the person and the plan that is shared action. So it's not just the creation of documents where we have checkoff boxes. And I'll be honest with you, in my 20 years of having experience with case management, there have been times when that was what my job was. I thought it was just to check off boxes. Did I ask about this? Did I ask about that? Did I check their cupboards to make sure they had food and water? And as I've grown in my work and my professional experience, it's much more about the person and not just checking off boxes. So, as the case manager, you are going to be the frontline person to change patterns away from segregation, stereotypes, devaluing a person, and the denial of opportunities. One of the things that really bugs me is to hear somebody say, oh, that person is too disabled to work. You know, every person that we work with has gifts and talents that they can bring to value to our communities and to where they are and to the people in their lives. So to make a judgment call that someone is too disabled to bring value is really not the attitude that we want to have. Also, honest, person-centered planning comes from respect for the dignity of the whole person. And together you define and pursue a desirable future. So it's a partnership. Next slide, please. So John O'Brien, who's the developer of the 5 valued experiences that all people need in their lives, no matter what their circumstances are or abilities. And these are those 5 valued experiences. So we have community presence, community participation, valued roles, promoting choice, and supporting contribution. So what is community presence? How do we increase a person's presence in their local community? I think we can all agree that life is better if you have a lot of places that you're able to share with other people, right? I mean, think about what we've been through during the public health emergency where we've been sheltering in place. I don't know about you, but after several months, I was ready to see other people's faces, right? So, you know, humans are built to have relationships. And so we want to make sure that individuals that we serve have the opportunity to be present in their community, of course, with respect to health and safety. Also, community participation. How can we expand and deepen relationships, especially unpaid relationships? Do you have a better life if you have a lot of diverse relationships? This isn't about whether or not you're an introvert or extrovert. We all need some basic relationships and a few deep ones. Relationships are the things that lead to love, safety, belonging, and networks for jobs. Next, we have valued roles. How are we contributing to and enhancing the reputation of people and increase the number of valued ways that people can contribute? As I said earlier, everyone can contribute something to the community they're in. By being respected and having dignity are very basic human needs. We often think of our self-worth that comes from our possessions, such as our homes, our cars, maybe even our ginormous televisions. But in reality, our self-worth sometimes can come from titles or our labels or our roles, such as fathers, mothers, artists. Some people are writers. Some people are listeners. We have neighbors. We have employees. We have citizens. We have breadwinners and families. We have craftsmen and a host of other things. But we all have roles in life, and those can help to bring value and self-worth to us. The 4th experience, promoting choice. So how do we as case managers empower people to have more control and choice in their life? We like to celebrate freedom and individuality in this country, so we know that choices are important to us. Where to spend time, who to hang out with, what to eat, where to worship, how to spend our life's work. All of these things give us a sense of confidence and let us express ourselves. One thing that was shared with me recently that I'd never thought of is sometimes people who may have disabilities, they might want to sleep late too. I don't know about you, but I like to sleep late. And sometimes we think, well, those people have to be on our schedule when our case managers can show up or when our direct service professionals can be there. And our day starts at 8 o'clock, so they need to get up at 8 o'clock too. Imagine having that freedom of choice taken away from you, that your life revolves around somebody else and what they want for your life. Lastly, number 5 is supporting contribution. So how are we supporting people to develop their skills and to contribute to their own strengths and unique gifts? What if you were only seen as a taker? What if your whole life everyone just saw you as someone that they were supposed to help or take care of? We all get a degree of self-worth when we give of ourselves, whether it's satisfaction in a job well done, doing a favor for a friend or a neighbor, or maybe volunteering to help a civic group or organization. Being a giver is what helps raise our self-awareness and status in the eyes of others. Next slide, please. So if you have been around person-centered work for any amount of time, I have no doubt that you have heard of Miss Beth Mount. And she has grew up in Atlanta in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. And Beth was influenced by Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to remember that we are all tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. She's one of the well-known founders of person-centered work, and I have a short video here that is a great illustration of system-centered care versus person-centered care. So, Tom, do you think that we might be able to watch the video?
Cross your fingers, people.
Ooh, there's a quick thing, Tom. We can't hear the sound, but if you go to there's like a little open share tray when you're sharing your screen. No, not that. Go to Teams where it says open share tray.
Oh, hang on just a minute.
Sorry. You got this.
I really don't. Okay, now what am I looking for?
So quit. Stop sharing your screen for a second.
Okay, stop sharing it?
Correct.
Okay.
And then go to the open share tray like you're sharing your screen again.
Yes.
And there's a little button that says include system audio. Make sure you have that checked.
Okay.
And then once you check that, go ahead and share your screen again and the video should play the sound.
Get out of here.
We're all learning something.
I only know this
Yes.
because this happened to me last week. So it's all good for you.
Is that better?
Listen, and I'm waiting to hear the sound come.
Oh, well, I can hear it. You couldn't hear it?
No, can you try turning it up a little bit?
Well,
I know I'm very needy.
I can't hear.
I can't hear it either.
all right, well, let me go back and redo this thing.
If it doesn't work, we can always skip it.
Well, let's try it one more time. All right, include system audio. Now it's checked.
Correct.
Let's just go to desktop.
And see what it looks like.
Is that better?
We just
Yep, we can hear it.
Yes.
Thanks, Tom.
define. origin of person-centered planning, we were trying to understand and see what it looks like when we just fit people into systems and defined their needs and saw them through the eyes of what a system needs for a person to be in order to generate the funding that's required and to basically service them. And system-centered work tends to be based on a medical model, which assumes something's wrong with people, and it's the system's job to fix them. And so the system is invested in defining them in terms of their deficiencies and creating a treatment plan, and then working to help people get it right before they get to be members and be whole people in the real world. So person-centered planning offers a major contrast to that, which is to say that people don't belong to systems. They belong to themselves, they belong to their families and their communities. And if we see them in a different light by the capacities that they bring, and we understand that their communities are the place where they can contribute and be citizens, then our thinking shifts dramatically from how to fit people into systems and service them there to how do we support people to live good lives in community, and then how do we take what we need from systems and services so that services are not bad, they just tend to be wired for their own purposes, for their own self-interest. So a good person-centered planning process calls into question the way we use services and invites us to really change the way most of our services are configured to be more responsive to the people and the way that they want to live in the communities that they're in.
Contact us for more information, for a free demonstration or trial, or to sign.
So I think Ms. Mount did a much better job that I could possibly ever do of explaining person-centered care versus system-centered care. You know, as a society, we have evolved our thinking from institutional care to community-based care, which is an improvement, right? However, more work definitely needs to be done. As some would say, we have created institutions in the community and are still in the mindset of trying to fit the people we serve into the system rather than seeing how the system can meet the needs and wants of people. This is one of the core principles of person-centered thinking, philosophy, and work. Next slide, please. So how can we move forward for this? What can you as case managers or whatever role you're in right now, what can you do to help move our thinking, our work, our philosophy, our driving forces away from system-centered care toward person-centered care? And so one of the first things you can do is to plan a lifetime, or one of the things we can move away from is planning a lifetime of programs that limit options. Because system-centered care is about what can the system offer, and person-centered is about what does the person want. They're polar opposites. So in a system-centered approach, your options are going to be based on stereotypes. So stereotypes of the aging or people with disabilities. One of the things that I've seen before is they think that every person that's over 65 is a fall risk, right? So does that diminish what is a true fall risk? We have to look at people individually and not just because of your age, put them in a category to be a certain risk level. Also, in a system-centered approach, there's an overemphasis on clinical strategies. As Ms. Mount said in her video, it's a medical model of services. So we want to move away from that and not to take away from the value that our medical research and resources provide to the care, but we want to focus on the person and not on the disease or the diagnosis. And lastly, a system-centered approach is definitely organized to please our funders, our regulators, our policies, our rules. It's not necessarily organized around the person and what their needs and wants are. So when you compare the two, a system-centered versus the person-centered, which one sounds more appealing to you? Which one do you want to live in and do you want to work in? A system-centered or a person-centered? I think the majority of us would lean towards a person-centered approach where we get to choose our lifestyle, we have unlimited opportunities for experiences, and we're really able to focus on the quality of life we have. It's an emphasis on our dreams, our desires, our meaningful experiences. And lastly, it's organized to respond to people. It's not necessarily organized to respond to the people who are making the rules or providing the funding. So when we look at the role of a case manager, we look sort of at the ecosystem of human services. And different workplaces give us different titles, but no matter what the title, we're all in the field, and that's the field of human services. With being in the field comes the old standard definitions of our role versus the person-centered thought process and culture of how we should be working with people. So if you look at the traditional planning role, this is where you are the expert and you set the direction. You organize all the activities, the services, you check off all the boxes. And I can tell you 20 years ago when I was fresh out of college and I thought that I knew everything and I could save the world, this was definitely the approach that I was taught, is that, you know, I'm the one that goes in and I write the case plan and I tell the family what services they're going to get and we're going to fix them, right? We're going to make things all better. And thankfully, my professional experience and my education has allowed me to evolve from that and realizing that I didn't fix a whole lot of anything, to be honest. My clients liked me, but to say that I really solved any problems or added to their quality of life might be questionable. So when we look at person-centered teams, this is where you mediate the interest of the provider and focus on the person leading organizational change efforts. But you also listen to direct care staff over the person receiving services, right? Because the staff, we think, are the experts, so they should know. But we really want to move towards a circle of support. And this is where the support direction is led by the person who's receiving the services with support from the group. And guess what? The person gets to pick who the group is, okay? Because we're focusing on the person and what their needs and wants are. So they should be the one to have a say in who's around them to help make decisions and help provide support. So in each one of these types of human service mindsets, you can see the role of the person receiving the services and how it varies. Next slide, please.
And I've got a quick question. I really appreciated the conversation you just had about, you know, we're the ones that went to school and have the degrees, so we're going to develop the care plan for them.
Right.
And we've developed a phrase for what happens when they don't follow our care plan.
I know what it is.
Who else wants to take a guess? Unmute yourselves. Throw it out there.
Non-compliant.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. So once they're non-compliant, they've become troublemakers, and then we start moving toward figuring out how can we discharge this person. And the simple thing is we just went about it wrong. So yeah, I had to write down non-compliance because it reminded me of that little piece. So thank you, Babs.
No, thank you, Tom, for interjecting. I remember there was a little phrase that we were taught to document when someone is non-compliant and we want to discharge them. That little phrase was maximum benefits achieved. There's nothing else we can do for this person. So So hopefully you're not reading that in your case notes, and that we're moving definitely away from that and focusing on how we can support the individual, which is an appropriate transition to conflict-free case management. And I know Tom already discussed this in our opening earlier, but conflict-free case management requires that assessment and coordination of services are separate from the delivery of services, with the goal to limit any conscious or unconscious bias a care manager or agency may have, and ultimately promote the individual's choice and independence. And so this is part of why we want the individual to choose who their support circle is, because they're going to choose people they know or they feel has their best interest in mind, and not going to have a bias as to who's going to get paid to provide what services. So next slide, please. So a conflict of interest occurs when a case manager is caught between the needs of the interests of the individual and the needs and the interests of the agency. So you don't have to speak up, but if you could just add in the chat box, you don't have to tell us who you are or where you're from, but has anybody ever been in a conflict before between knowing what the needs of the individual was and the needs or the wants of the agency? You can just say yes or no if you've ever experienced that conflict, or maybe you heard it from a friend. Might not necessarily be your agency. Sure, yeah, we see lots of people have had that experience. And I can tell you, I personally have had that experience of me knowing what the individual that I was serving needed and or wanted and was expressing their desire for, and what my agency that I worked for was saying that they needed or wanted and was in the best interest of the agency. So some of the things that we can see happening is, for example, promoting the over or underutilization of services. For example, by not recommending costly services to a person because the services are too expensive. That can also be us keeping individuals as clients rather than promoting their independence, and educating the individual about their freedom to choose an independent case manager because the agency doesn't want to lose funding. Also, advocating for a service delivery system and plan that is not person-centered. For example, this could be advocating for services that are readily available rather than services that the person really needs or wants. So unfortunately, these are all yucky situations that as case managers, sometimes you find yourself in, and it can be a real moral dilemma. And you sort of have to find yourself professionally and seek guidance from your supervisor and how to move forward when those situations occur, so that we are always keeping the person's needs and wants first and foremost. Next slide, please. So Tom talked a little bit about cultural competence, and we're going to talk about older adults, since I know this is one of our primary target populations that you all serve. And I just love this cartoon here. I think it's so appropriate to the conversation today. So you see the case manager or the person speaking says, "So, what do you prefer to be called? Handicapped, disabled, physically challenged?" And the gentleman who's sitting in the wheelchair to the right says, "Joe would be fine." And it says this is the most appropriate label, is usually the one people's parents have given them, which I think is cute. Understanding what it means to practice in a culturally competent manner is vital in today's diverse society. Healthcare professionals, in particular, must understand the effects of a patient's culture and beliefs on their interaction and how they interact with the healthcare system or the service system. Specifically, the needs of older adults, and especially the needs of older adults in different ethnic groups, must be addressed in a culturally competent and sensitive manner. If practitioners fail to understand cultural influences, many older adults will suffer unintended negative health outcomes. Next slide, please. So we have here a really great visual of the continuum of cultural competence. And I'm not going to read this to you guys because you are all adults. And I'm sure that Tom will be happy to provide these printed resource materials to you all after the training. But this just gives us a great visual of how people can move through the continuum of cultural competence. And I would be willing to bet that everybody in this training has probably seen people in each one of these categories before. You've either worked with them, or you've worked for them, or you've supervised them. And what we see is that, in honesty, it's not linear. I think people can move back and forth in different directions and may skip from one place or another based on what their lens is that they're viewing the world through at the time. But cultural competence can help us to better meet the needs of diverse aging populations. And I know you guys are definitely seeing that in the field, in the work that you're doing right now, is that our aging population is incredibly diverse. Also, cultural competence is a set of cultural behaviors and attitudes integrated into the practice methods of a system, an agency, or its professionals that enable them to work effectively in cross-cultural situations. So we can see that we certainly want to move ourselves towards the purple category on the far right side, where we're able to implement changes to improve services based on the needs of the cultures that we're serving, and try and get ourselves away from that cultural destructiveness. One of the things that I love talking about is person-first language. Whenever I worked for one of our area agencies on aging, and I had the opportunity to participate in a workshop at our ADRC Healthy Communities Summit, I remember Amy Reedesill, who is now my boss, doing a presentation on person-first language and how important that was. And that was so impactful for me at the time. Just learning how to be sensitive to everybody, not just people with disabilities, but recognizing that we're all people before we're anything else. So this illustration here just shows the lady is saying, I'm not a wheelchair bound person. I'm a person who uses a wheelchair. And that is the simplest way you can explain person-first language to anybody. You notice whenever you're using person-first language, you're noting the person before you're noting anything else. And this is one simple way, but a huge way that we can demonstrate a person-centered philosophy in how we communicate. Labels are such a huge part of the work we do. It's how we communicate every day. We need a diagnosis and clinical recommendations to authorize services within our systems, right? But is it also that the language we're using when we talk about people and options and choices? So using person-first language is such an important reminder and often overlooked as a first step in demonstrating a respect for someone. So as a reminder, while we all have labels, some of them we may be more fond of than others. And I'll give you an example. So if you ever looked at your, or been at your doctor's office and the doctor is going over your diagnoses and you see that you are referred to as an obese person. I don't know about you, but I'm not too fond of that label or diagnosis. Why can't it just be that I'm a person who happens to be obese based on clinical measures? Another thing that I often saw in the behavioral health world or in healthcare whenever I worked in a hospital setting was I would hear people say, oh, we have a diabetic in room 3, or we have a schizophrenic in room 10. What a difference it makes when you say, I have a person who has diabetes in room 3. That's showing respect for the person because they're not just their diagnosis, but they're a person first. The same thing is with a mental illness. To say that we have a person who has schizophrenia in room 10, He's a person first before he is his diagnosis. So think about yourself. Think about the labels that you might use to describe yourself, whether they be good labels or not so good labels. I think you can all agree that you want to be a person before you're any of those things. Can anybody give us some examples of some person first language?
Okay, there's a person living with dementia in the chat, or somebody has suggested that's person first language.
Yep, that's a great one. So we're looking at the person first.
Mm-hmm. I am a person
love it.
who lives with, yes.
You're right, Monica. You're not your diagnosis.
A person with MI, yes.
All right, next slide, Tom. Because you know what? I think that your case managers have this person first language thing. So instead of focusing on what the condition or the illness or the disability or any other label, you want to focus on the person first. So you see in the right-hand column how each statement begins with identifying the person first. And that's how easy person first language is. So that is the first step that you all can take in making sure that you as a case manager and your teams and your staff and your organization are just giving basic, simple respect to the individuals that you serve. Next slide, please. And here's just some more examples. Again, very simple. Just move the person first. Whether, especially, I love the one about calling people wheelchair bound, wheelchair confined. We've all seen those terms. We've seen them in the notes. But they're a person who uses a wheelchair, just like I'm a person who wears glasses. And I'm a person who has extra pounds. Next slide, please. So here's a little refresher. We all learned this in college, but it's a good time for us to look at these Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is our psychological needs are not being met. You cannot work above that level. Does this sound familiar? Mm-hmm. In most cases, the most basic needs are being met, the foundation level of the work we set out to do as case managers. But what about the higher levels? How satisfied would you be in life if all of the people around you that you had relationships were paid to be around you? What about your self-worth? How would that make you feel? Sometimes you notice, what is the second or third question we ask when we meet somebody new? Oh, what do you do? That automatically attaches their self-worth to what it is they contribute or what type of work it is they do. So we have to meet those very basic psychological needs first, then our needs for safety, security, resources, health. And then that moves to love and belonging, so our friendships, our sense of connection. And then our self-esteem, whether it's respect, our status, our recognition, our strength. Excuse me. And then finally, the top of the hierarchy is self-actualization. So that's our desire to become the most that one can be. So where do we start? When we're looking at person-centered planning, this is a lot of information to take in, and you have to figure out, how do I make all of this work, and how do I meet all the requirements that those pesky people at the Division of Aging require, and that Tom is going to be looking for. So first, with the hierarchy of needs in mind, take a few minutes and think about things that are meaningful to you. You don't have to put them in the chat. You can just think about them in your head or jot them down on a piece of paper in front of you. But I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 seconds just to think about the 5 things that are most meaningful to you in your life, whatever those things may be. Okay, now that you have your 5 things, imagine, if you will, that all of a sudden one of those things is gone. One of those things on your list, beyond your control, is taken away from you. How does that make you feel? And you can either share by unmuting yourself, or you can put it in the chat. Okay, so someone shared their friendship, family, love, education, and purpose. How would you feel if one of those 5 things was taken away?
I don't want anyone to take it away.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
I don't want anyone to take these things away from me.
Sure, you don't, they would be devastating, or people are saying sad, scary, angry, frustrated, depressed. So think about, in terms of the work that we do with individuals, sometimes they lose the things that are most important to them. And they have those same thoughts and emotions. They may feel sad, they may feel scared, they may feel angry, especially for someone who's the most important thing to them might be their independence. And what if we suddenly take that independence away? Because you know what? We're the professionals, so we're the experts. We know what's best for them. They don't need to drive. That can lead to a lot of feelings and even depression to lose something that's that important to them. Yeah, absolutely agree, somebody said. So that's why person-centered planning is so important, because first you have to understand what's important to the people I'm serving. And I encourage you, have that conversation with the people you serve. It might not be on your check sheet or the things you have to cover, but add it. I think you'll find that sometimes the things that you might think are important to people might be different to what they report to you as actually being important to them. So thank you for doing that little exercise with us. It's much more fun in person, but you guys made it work, so thank you. Next slide, please. So take a minute and read through the 9 boxes we have here on the screen. The question is, what if? And there are 9 questions. And I'm going to choose one of them for us. So what if the job you did was not useful? What if the job you were given was not useful? How would you feel about doing that job every day? And you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, either way. But I want to hear, how would that make you feel if you knew that your job was not useful? You didn't accomplish anything. You didn't create any value or worth. Nobody saw it as creating value or worth. And you had to do it every day, 5 days a week, for 40 hours. Yeah, you would feel awful. Someone said joyless, discouraged, unfulfilled. Somebody said, I wouldn't want to be on that job. Somebody said they would likely quit. They would feel useless. They would feel depressed. So use that same concept with the people that we serve. Why should we stick somebody in a job just to say they have supported employment if they don't feel useful in that job? What are we accomplishing? We're checking off a box. We're not adding value to their life. So there's 9 great questions here. I really love the one above that too. What if your money was always kept in an envelope where you couldn't get it? Now, I don't know if any of you've ever worked in a residential setting, but I have. And I can tell you that's what we did was we kept people's money in an envelope. How would you feel if your money that you earned or that came to you because of a benefit that was yours and somebody else kept it in an envelope and decided when you could use it? That's not very person-centered. Yes, you would feel powerless. You'd feel disrespected. So some really great thought-provoking questions here. I encourage you to use these. Use these with your staff. Use them with your team. These are great conversation pieces. Oh, somebody said they would fight back to get it. Then what happens? Then you become labeled non-compliant and combative, right? We don't want to get you that label. So in the interest of time, let's move on. Our next slide, and we're going to talk about dignity of risk. So 3 points regarding dignity of risk. Overprotection may appear on the surface to be kind. Excuse me, but really it's not. Overprotection from keep people from becoming all they could become or from being as much as they can continue to be. And lastly, many of our best achievements came from the hard way. We've all taken risks. We've all fallen flat. We've all suffered. But we've also all picked ourselves up and we've tried again. Sometimes we make it and sometimes we don't. Even so, we were given the chance to try. And persons with disabilities or those who are older adults deserve the opportunity and the chance to try. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but you know what? That's what dignity of risk is about. They have the opportunity to try and honor that dignity. Next slide, please, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Because of course, I know we have to talk about prudent risks. I get it. You know, there's danger, there's safety, there's liability. I used to be a compliance officer. I understand all about that. But people should not be expected to blindly face challenges that will explode in their faces. Knowing which chances are prudent and which ones are not, this is a new skill that can be acquired. The real world is not always safe. It's not always secure, and it's certainly not always predictable. It does not say, please excuse me or I'm sorry. But sometimes every day we face possibilities of being thrown into situations where we're all at risk for everything. And I used a little illustration here of we have a boy and a girl on bicycles. And again, this is a very simple illustration. But remember what it was like learning to ride a bike. Sometimes you fell down. Sometimes you scraped your knees or elbows. Sometimes you might have even scraped your nose if you went over the handlebars. But eventually that was part of us learning how to ride a bicycle. And hopefully you had a helmet on to protect your head and your parents made sure that you had adult supervision. But eventually you were able to learn how to ride a bike. And there were some falls and there were some challenges, but your parents allowed you that opportunity to learn how to ride a bike. So I think that sometimes we have to look at how we balance risk and safety and given respect and autonomy to our particularly older adults or individuals with disabilities.
Babs, there's a question in the chat that might be helpful for us to kind of take a detour on. It's how do you honor dignity of risk when you know personally and professionally that a person is a danger to themselves or others?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think, again, we have to look at the person first. And of course, in our line of work, we have to look at health and safety and risk of health and safety. If someone is a danger to themselves or others, and how we define that. So, again, as I said, I came from the behavioral health world. And does someone not taking their medication make, let's say, a medication for, I'll use my father-in-law as an example. He doesn't like taking his gout medicine. Now, do I think that it's important for him to take that so that he will not have a bout of gout? Yes, because I know that that will be painful for him. However, does he have the choice not to take it? Yes, he does, because that is not going to affect his immediate health and safety. So I say if he doesn't want to take it, he doesn't have to take it. Now, his doctor might argue with me, but I think that as an adult and he's of sound mind and body, he should have the ability to make that choice whether or not he wants to take that medication. So, Tom, I'm going to ask you to weigh in from your professional experience as well as the position you're in now with the Division of Aging. How do you all balance that dignity of risk?
Well, yeah. Sorry, I leaned back to pulled out my earphones. Um, so this is really an interesting question, and I don't the I think there's some pieces to it. One is the person able to understand their situation? Okay, so if they're in a if they're having a mental health episode, um, or they are if they're a person with late stage dementia, okay, or there's some situation where they don't understand what's going on, and they don't understand what's happening and the possible consequences, then I think there's a professionally responsible thing about seeking help for that person. Okay. Um, on the other hand, if they are aware of the situation, and as a professional, I have been honest with them about the potential risks, and we've talked through those, and they seem to understand them. Um, I'm so a couple of examples. One is when I was with Adult Protective Services back in the late 80s. I remember there was a gentleman named Stephen, and he had, I think he had a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. And he was just a delightful guy. He lived in a little trailer and kept it clean. He was an artist with some amazing artwork. And he told me one day, he's like, I am just sick of taking this medicine all the time, and I'm going to stop taking it. And we had a conversation, and I told him, I said, well, I don't know what it's like to take medication all the time, but, I will support that decision for you. Now, you have to understand that if you become a danger to yourself or others, I'm obligated to take out a mental inquest warrant. And we were able to have that conversation. Back when my grandmother used to get out in the yard and garden, and it would drive my mother crazy because she's like, she's gonna fall over the flower bed. And I told her, I said, well, if that makes her happy, I'd rather her fall over in the petunias than have her sitting at the table and just shrivel up to nothing. So, this notion about what if it leads to that person dying? Well, we're all going to die anyway. So, part of the pulling all of this together is I need to understand what's important to that person and what is valuable to them. It's not my decision to make for, it's not my decision to tell that person, well, you know, you need to stick around on this earth for another so long. Um, you know, that's not my job. Okay. So, one of the things we have not historically done well that I'm hoping this training will lead to is, we do our DONR and our NSI and whatever, but this notion of finding out what do our clients value? What is, going back to Maslow's chart, what are those top two things for them? What brings meaning to their life? And, if I can have those conversations, um, and, the person has the right to make whatever decisions those are. I don't know that I can give you a checklist or an if this, then that kind of thing, which is hopefully why you have good supervision, either from a manager or colleagues. These are the kind of things where we talk about, hopefully in our calls. So if you have cases, we're happy to do that. Um, Tanya says, yeah, this is where supervision is very important, and I would agree with that. So I don't know if that helps you a whole lot, Nikki, but um, um, if you want to unmute yourself, we can have a bit more of a conversation. I do think this is an important um, topic to discuss. And if anybody else has any thoughts or situations where you've handled this well, you think, and would like to add.
I mean, I feel like I understand what you and Babs are saying, and I agree. I guess the difficult part for me is leaving that person in that state. Like, I guess it messes with me mentally to know that I left a person there who may or may not have dementia, who to me isn't making the best choices, but I can't force them. Like, for instance, I had a client who was a frequent fall risk, and he fell. I showed up at the home, just so happened when he fell, and I called 911. I could see that he was physically injured, but he refused to seek medical treatment and refused to go to the ER. And of course, the emergency management team wouldn't force him to go, but he, in my opinion, he really needed to go. So I was stuck in a position of leaving him there and just going on to my next visit, or trying to convince him to go. But I guess in that instance, I'm not really honoring his dignity of risk.
So why didn't he want to go?
Oh.
Welcome to the audio conference.
Hello. So I'll use that example, and that's a really good one. Assuming, so let's read this comment here. There are many, hang on, there are many factors in determining risk and weighing options. It is hard to wrap one's mind around allowing other people to make choices, especially when they are alert and oriented. So, what we talked earlier a little bit about sort of this cultural competency thing. I'm going to take a slight detour on that. And one of the most critical qualifications for successful case management is some self-awareness. Okay? So when I come to these situations, I'm bringing all of my experience and my history and things that have happened to me. Okay? And so if by nature I am risk averse, I run the risk, to borrow the favor the term, of imposing that belief on other people. Okay, or if I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do the right thing. I mean, I've got a whole bunch of baggage I bring to this job, okay? And so my job is to be aware of those. But again, part of the training here is moving beyond, can you bathe yourself? Can you cook? Can you go to the doctor? you know, what is important to you? If you, okay, so if you were to fall, I understand you don't want to go to Tai Chi, and I understand you don't want grab bars. If you were to fall, what would happen? Would that concern you? What would you want to have happen? You know, um, I don't want to go to the doctor. Well, why don't you want? I need to be able to find out what's important to these people. Okay, and use that as part of my information, because I do not have the right to force people to do things that I would do or that I would like them to do. Now, again, there's this small caveat of they are not in a state of awareness and they are a present danger to themselves or others. That's sort of a specific group, okay? But, there may be a perfectly good reason this person doesn't want to go to the hospital or the doctor or do whatever whatever you want them to do. But I need to be able to have those conversations, and we are not comfortable having conversations about people's beliefs, their values, their spirituality, what is their vision for their lives. It's not something we're trained to do, and I dare say we're kind of not comfortable with it. Okay, but at some point it becomes essential for me to do that, because I may not be able to have these conversations with folks unless I know some of that stuff. Okay, so other comments or suggestions?
Tom,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, this is Monica. I have a client on my caseload, which when I did screening, she was referred to me for a case management. She was like, when I screened her, she was able to do everything what she told me, but her family was telling me that she is not able, for example, to pay her bills, take her medication and everything, and they want her to go to personal care home. But the client wanted to be independent, and I know I as a person centered, I cannot make her to go, or if she doesn't want to. But anyhow, they place her in the personal care home. And she is still, when I called her to check if she wants to really be there, she's still telling me that she doesn't. So I cannot proceed or help her until she, would like to be there. So it's kind of something. And I just, from the family, I know that she is really, dangerous to herself, and she has the memory issue diagnosis. Her mom and dad, they had both dementia, and she was diagnosed with the first stage. So it's kind of really, she's so nice, and when you talk to her, that she can do everything, and she wants to stay home. But on the other hand, when I call her next day, she didn't even remember me, she didn't even know we talk. So I know she is dealing with issues, memory, cognitive impairment, so forth. And I'm kind of split in that too, because I know she's at a personal care home now, and her family is paying for it, but they were hoping that she would like get the help. So what would you do? What would be your, or other people, what would be the things they would recommend?
Any suggestions?
Tom, this is Babs. If you
Yeah.
want to flip to the next slide, and I think there may be some information that can kind of help us around some of these situations.
Well, there we go.
So And I certainly don't want to dismiss your technical assistance opportunity, because these are great conversations, and I'm really thankful that this has presented the opportunity to have these. And I love here the second bullet point. It says it's not possible to eliminate risk, but you can formulate strategies to minimize it. And I think this is where we have an opportunity to sit down with the person that we're serving and with the people that they choose to be in their support circle, and to have those conversations to say, if we can't eliminate the risk, what can we do as a team to work together to minimize it? To help bring everybody to understanding why this is important to the person, and to look at ways that we can think outside the box and not think about our clinical ways of handling things, but think about what's this person's idea of what a solution could be. And that way, I think it helps us to be able to minimize potential harm to the individuals that we serve, if that makes sense. That also allows us, yep, somebody said the third bullet point is exactly how I feel. If allowing someone to undertake or engage in a risky activity does not make you negligent, failing to take any steps to minimize foreseeable harm could be. So I think as professionals, we have to know that we take the steps necessary to help minimize any harm that could happen. And I think you're able to have those conversations, even though they're really icky and tough to have with families and with the individuals we serve. I think you'll glean more information by doing it collaboratively and finding out, like you said, what's important to the person.
Yeah, I love these scenarios because it just kind of really allows life to play, and I really am very appreciative and thrilled about a lot of the comments we've gotten. They're very helpful, and one of the things that we touched on earlier, and we'll come back to um, in one of the future sessions, has to do with this. Um, and it's sort of a nuance of dignity of risk of when the person wants to do something and the family wants them to do something different, and I don't think either one of them is necessarily a good choice, or I like one choice over the other one, and how to navigate through some of that. One of the key lessons I've learned is that whatever client or whatever situation, I'm walking into that at a point in time. And there's a whole lot of history that I don't know. Okay. And one of the ways I can practice a person centered approach is to try to find out some of that history. Has this happened before with your mom? Or what kind of things have you noticed over time? Or, some of those kinds of conversations. So, this dignity of risk, we could have we could lock ourselves in a cabin for a week and still not get through all of it. So.
Thank you all so much for your honest feedback and sharing your experiences and your thoughts. I think, yeah, as Tom said, it gives us an opportunity to help drive some next steps and some other learning opportunities for us.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, am I taking up too much of your time?
No, we are good.
Okay. I'm going to skip motivational interviewing in the interest of time, and I want to talk as we close out today about self-care for helping professionals. So you probably heard lots about self-care, but you're going to hear the Babs version today. Self-care isn't just about eating right, exercising, and getting enough sleep. While important, those elements only scratch the surface of an intentional and successful wellness plan. Maintaining physical, mental, and emotional health is vital for everyone, but it can be especially important for those of us working in healthy professions such as social work, nursing, counseling. Practicing self-care can be an antidote for burnout, which is a combination of mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion. While employees in many fields experience burnout, you guys as social services professionals are particularly susceptible because of the high levels of empathy required by your jobs. They also experience the stress of working with clients who are often in crisis or working for an agency where resources are scarce. Can anybody relate to that? It is intrinsic to your work that social workers and case managers strive to ease your individual client's suffering, which can lead to emotional and physical depletion for you. So, do you recognize the signs of compassion fatigue in yourself? And if so, what are some of the ways that you're able to cope with that? So you can add that to the chat box. Tell us what you have seen in terms of people who may have signs of compassion fatigue, whether it's yourself or your coworkers, and how you minimize that. And while you're adding your responses, I'll tell you from my personal experience, in the last couple of years, I experienced an issue from working 50 and 60 hours a week in the social services field. It was very demanding, and I was under a lot of physical stress. And what happened was my heart rate kept increasing. And I had an EKG, I had an echocardiogram, I had chest x-rays, I had all the things and all the blood work. And we could not figure out what it was that was causing my heart rate to be elevated. Like, my resting heart rate was around 110 beats per minute. And that was just sitting here having a conversation. Whenever I was able to eliminate some of the stress in my life by making some lifestyle changes, I found that my heart rate came down to 85 beats per minute. And the physical changes in my body as a result were just pretty miraculous. I didn't realize what a huge impact stress was having on me physically, and this body that I hope will carry me on for a few more years. So that's just my little anecdotal story of one of the reasons why it's so important for us to take care of our stress, and to recognize when we're experiencing compassion fatigue. Because often the people that are coming to you are needing things or wanting things, and then sometimes you're not getting the people until they're in crisis, and then you're the fixer. So who wants to share some of their thoughts about what they've experienced as far as compassion fatigue and recognizing the signs and symptoms, as well as how to manage those? I know some people have said they use yoga, prayer, swimming, keeping a journal, spending time outside. Also, people using exercise. That's a great outlet for stress and compassion fatigue. Humor, which is very good as well. And massage. Oh, that's my favorite one. Someone mentioned stress can manifest itself in so many ways. You may sweep it under the rug for the moment, but it will come out, and that is for sure. Talk to your peers and your supervisor. Someone mentioned that walking helps with stress. Walking every day in the morning before work. Yes, all great stress relievers. And it's so important. I just can't emphasize enough for case management staff how important it is to take care of yourself. Next slide, Tom. So just a little comparison here as we're getting ready to close out around compassion fatigue versus compassion satisfaction. What we know is we are all currently in the midst of a public health emergency. It is affecting every single one of us, maybe some of us more so than others, but it's affecting us all. We're also in the middle of an economic crisis, budget shortfalls, and because of some of these things, we may be experiencing compassion fatigue.
You've been home for a whole hour.
All right, somebody needs to mute themselves, please.
So compassion fatigue is a broadly defined concept that can include emotional, physical, and spiritual distress in those who are providing care for another. It is associated with caregiving, whether it be caregiving for people or for animals, and individuals who are experiencing emotional or physical pain and suffering. So what we know about compassion fatigue is that it can sometimes also be called secondary traumatic stress, or a set of behaviors and emotions that can occur when the professional is seeking to help a suffering person. On the other hand, compassion satisfaction is defined as the pleasure derived from helping others. So what this may sound like or look like is having happy thoughts about the work that you do, enjoying and trusting your coworkers, and all important parts of being satisfied with the work that you're doing. So I know we've kind of rushed through the end of our presentation here, but I just want to make sure that you guys have enough time to finish your boot camp for the rest of the day. I don't want to get in trouble with Tom. But it's been such a pleasure to present for you this morning. I feel like I kind of came home being with my Division of Aging folks. So thank you so much, Tom, for the opportunity. And please feel free to share the presentation with those who were able to attend. And I will look forward to seeing you again on Thursday.